política, el impacto de las mujeres y su representación en la ciencia. Entonces, esos ecosistemas mucho más integrados deben ser parte de la discusión, seguir fortaleciendo la alianza con los gobiernos nacionales independientemente de las posturas políticas o de los cambios políticos que vengan en nuestro país, porque la agenda de las mujeres debe trascender cualquier forma de gobernanza. De hecho, deben interrumpir de manera mucho más concretas las políticas neoliberales y derechistas que por más de 200 años han tenido el control del sistema político y económico de Colombia, ¿no? Entonces estamos ante una nueva puerta de diálogo con el Estado en el marco de un gobierno progresista.
So all of this is part of a progressive government that is open to listening and incorporating the voices of women from a place of plurality with concrete objects in order to democratize our national sciences system.
Thank you very much, Minister. You talked about many of the advances that are being built in the system to pave way to those spaces that were complicated in the past. Well, based on your experience, could you tell us about the critical lessons learned and the obstacles that still remain? And what would you like to share with our African colleagues as well? Well, the greatest challenge continues to be financing, budget. We cannot talk about advancements in gender politics if we don't have finances and clear numbers, because we have to go from speech to action, and for that we require budget. But that requires that we strengthen our partnerships with different government stakeholders, including the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of the Environment, but also with the private sector. The private sector plays a vital role. We have found a system and we have tried to intervene from our position as a government, and we see that the industry does not connect with the academia, and even less so with female academicians. And if you look at decision makers in other countries, most of them are foreign and they are men in private companies. That is a weakness, because an industry that seeks to nationalize an economy so that we can strengthen the economic borders with the countries around the world, first they need to incorporate the talent available in the country. We already have a trained human talent, and this is why we have scientists living in diaspora because of the lack of opportunities in Colombia. But in that system, women continue to be underrepresented. So by working with companies, we have established partnerships and offered mechanisms that encourage the involvement or employment of young female researchers in the public and private companies in our country so that they can contribute to reducing these gaps. However, financing also led us to coordinate efforts. The Ministry of Education is important. We have a budget for universities, more than 70 billion pesos. That has never been seen in previous administrations. This is the historical budget that is here to set a new baseline to train and to strengthen public and private universities. What is our commitment with the Ministry of Education? For every new university facilities built by the government, there have to be also affirmative political strategies, including female researchers and doctors in our country. We have already seen significant results with these efforts. With the Ministry of Mines, we have already signed agreements for more than 200 billion pesos because of tenders that are being led through the universities for energy transition projects and the development of new green algorithms for the decarbonization of the bioeconomy, geothermics, all of this led by female researchers in these areas of expertise. Of course, we are profiling a new field for the political positioning for women. So what have we been working on with Africa? Our Vice President Francia Marquez has been empathetic. She has been very emphatic in saying that we need to set up embassies in African countries. We have one in Ethiopia, Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, and these embassies turn into a bridge for geopolitical exchange between women. We already have cultural groups of Afro-descending women in the Colombian Pacific region for artistic exchanges with different African countries. In the first quarter of 2026, we are going to start scientific exchanges led by women. Of course, without forgetting the knowledge generated by women from their territories. Because we need to include the other vision of knowledge, ancestral knowledge, because ancestral knowledge is not the same as folklore. Ancestral knowledge becomes more complicated with research and with the arrival of technology. So in those fields, women can establish the geopolitical coordination efforts, and from the national government, we promote financing, participation mechanisms, and we provide the institutional conditions to provide a safe, robust opportunity for our women in science. These are wonderful news. It is incredible to hear all the actions undertaken to strengthen the presence of women in all areas of science. In that regard, my question would be that the women who already have access to these different opportunities, how have they been able to consolidate their experience, and how can they participate in the evaluation of public policies or the proposal of adjustments or innovations in public policies? What are the opportunities for them, and how can we grow this critical mass for public policy in favor of female science? Well, as Dr. Brigitte said, I wanted to tell you about a chapter that we initiated at the Ministry of Science. I come from Tumaco, which is a region that has been strongly affected by armed conflict. One of the territories with the largest amounts of coca crops and laboratories for cocaine production. And now, the Pacific region in Nariño, connected with the jungle in Darien, these have become the main forced mobility routes for people transiting through Latin America. And the majority of these migrants are women. Women who are journalists, professionals, escaping from the economic extractivism of countries, and who are redefining the diaspora processes and also the configuration of identities and the recognition of human rights for Afro-descending populations. So within this framework, we decided to create our mission, Science for Peace. What does it mean to involve science and peace in the generation of knowledge in a country that has been under armed conflict for more than 70 years? Well, precisely the purpose of that mission is to develop research prototypes and also to develop the necessary technologies so that we can install capacities to build new legal economic models in the territories. We invited our researchers and doctors around the country, and we asked them about their projects when it comes to science for peace. How can you, as a doctor who's scientifically empowered, how can you contribute to women in Tumaco, Aventura, Barbacoa, and the women in the Caribbean to strengthen their conditions of life? We found wonderful opportunities. Technologies allow us to map gender violence cases, but we can also arrive at diagnosis and solutions. These are women who are developing prosthetics for children, victims of landmines in Colombian fields. But also, women have used research and they have found alternative uses for coca leaves, and they are transitioning from illicit to licit activities, and their impact of the scientific efforts in areas such as pharmaceutical companies, energy companies, industries, agricultural products, and other areas. So that is building science with a representation and leadership of women, acknowledging science as a human right and as a social good for all of us. This means if science is not capable of transforming historical material existential conditions based on gender and social inequalities and existential inequalities, then we have to do more. Science needs to transform, and all scientific research projects led by women in our policies should leave installed capacities in the territories. That means laboratories, governance processes, the transformation of production chains that economically empower women, because that is the only way, in our opinion, of creating direct advocacy that is transformational and that guarantees human rights, so that we can lead our country towards a society of knowledge with gender perspectives and involving the participation in women in all its diversities. Well, to conclude, we would like to talk about interregionality and cooperation. The International Science Council promotes dialogue between Europe, Latin America, the Caribbean, Asia, and Africa, not just as an exchange of knowledge, but as a process of co-designing scientific agendas and public policies. And thanks to our regional focal points, this has allowed us to foster mechanisms that connect scientific communities from the global south with multilateral mechanisms from the United Nations, ensuring that science contributes directly to decision-making processes. These interregional partnerships involving member states, such as the Organization for Women in Science for the Developing World, that is represented here by more than 57 countries. You are all here this afternoon. Female scientists should not just be part of the research, but they should also guide the priorities towards a more equitable and sustainable growth. So in this sense, dear Minister, I would like to understand how we can strengthen these partnerships between regions so that female scientists don't just partake in the research process, but that they can also guide the agenda towards a truly inclusive and sustainable agenda. Well, as part of CELAC's pro-temporary presidency under the leadership of our national government and President Gustavo Petro, as the Ministry of Science, we lead the scientific cooperation agenda. And we also organized the first bi-regional meeting between Latin America and the Caribbean and the European Union to address scientific issues and urgent technological debates for humanity. This has never happened before in the history of CELAC. On September 29th, we met in Brussels with more than 30 countries represented by the ministers, deputy ministers of science, technology, and innovation, and we were able to create a cooperation network focusing on a strategic issue: AI and quantum supercomputing. Why these two topics? Because these are the two technologies that are directly connected to the new productivity systems and that are creating a scientific, unprecedented revolution. But when we try to identify how many female scientists are leading these areas of knowledge, well, of course, we didn't identify many of them. The other issue would be lack of awareness and visibility as well. That led the ministry to work on a program for sciences and quantum technologies, which is the first program in Latin America and the Caribbean that gathered all the doctors from the faculties of engineering and arts, because quantum physics is also in arts, in culture, in cultural expressions and humanity. We asked them to present research projects that could shed light on our contributions to these areas of knowledge, and on the other hand, different solutions to strategic issues. The deans of the different universities called me up and they said, Minister, we cannot find the 300 women that are going to be financed by the Ministry of Science. But oh surprise, we actually received more than 1,000 applications. Female, young women working in physics, social sciences, and humanities and other areas that are already undertaking research projects. These projects are now being financed by the ministry, and they will be part of this network, this bi-regional network, in articulation with the European Union, whose epicenter would be Barcelona. In Barcelona, we can find one of the most significant quantum supercomputing centers in the world. And in a few years' time, our Colombian women will be able to strengthen our research capabilities by using these supercomputers that are not available in Colombia. We also face a significant technological gap that we need to solve. What are we seeking now? We want the supercomputing network based on those areas of network to be connected with the universities of the African Union. We have already established contact with our colleagues at Ascun to be able to develop this system of academic and scientific mobility. And in the short term, we wish to have strategic results. I would like to mention the importance of these networks, and I want to highlight the importance of the scientific ecosystems that are developed around the work generated by universities. And I want to highlight the importance for the national government to maintain an active dialogue with the academic actors of the different science, technology, and innovation ecosystems so that we can strengthen policies and we can reach consensus about the priority areas of knowledge. And this way, we can prevent the dispersion of knowledge, but also the dispersion of resources. And finally, not long ago, we launched our research group measurement program. And when we assessed how the researchers are being measured in our country, we found in previous administrations that they had not included gender perspectives to analyze the scientific productivity of women. Of course, considering their labor conditions and the inclusion to the academia. We conducted an observation process with a differential scoring system for women who in the past 6 years of their academic life have become mothers or that have suffered positive discrimination given their gender, and that led us to a greater recognition of women in science or greater recognition of their scientific productivity. And we believe that this will be a strategic platform so that they can have access to financing mechanisms. As a country, this will allow us to leave a group and research measurement system that is more democratic, decentralized, non-elitist, thinking about the regions, the territories, women and their diversities, and the productivity of the knowledge generated from the different areas of knowledge. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. And thank you, Carolina, and thank you, Dr. Baptiste, as well.
Now it's that time that I promised that you need to do me a favor and ask some questions. So I am not sure whether I can see some hands in the group. Oh, I can't see any hand. Really? Thank you. There's a microphone. Another hand. Thank you. You're wonderful. Okay, go ahead.
Bien, buenas tardes. Muchas gracias.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I am from El Salvador. I want to congratulate the government of Colombia for working so effortlessly in education and for prioritizing women. We are truly fascinated, as well as with my colleague from El Salvador joining me, we are truly fascinated by the level of interest from authorities in promoting education and fostering the opportunities for scientific growth. My question is, if this model serves as a benchmark for other regions in Latin America, and if you have been approached by the Central American region to see how you can promote this agenda for the inclusion of women, and also scientific work, and to understand that women have been discriminated historically in this regard. So I would like to understand how you are disseminating all these strategies and these huge efforts that I see that you are undertaking here, which are quite admirable. Thank you.
From OWDS in Ecuador, my name is Patricia Viseño. I want to thank you for everything that you have touched upon, and in line with what my colleague from El Salvador said, I would like to refer to something more specific. I saw the minister in January this year in Antarctica coming back from the expedition, and there's a very good Ecuador-Colombia collaboration as part of the Antarctica program. I'd like to ask, what are you thinking of doing in terms of increasing women's participation and advocacy in areas where we're traditionally much more marginalized, as are marine sciences, ocean sciences, like Antarctica? I'd love to learn what your view is and what strategies you're thinking of implementing. Thank you. Thank you so much to the colleagues from El Salvador and Ecuador for your questions. I'd like to start out with the first question. In my experience here at the ministry, changing the patriarchal structures which have been a part of the construction of our nation states imply the level of social sensibility of decision makers, and that is why the different schools and universities and research centers need to make progress in humanizing the research practice. What does it mean to humanize the research practice? To recognize ourselves in the other. If we don't have a policy of recognizing me and the other, we are not going to be able to change the structures. In my experience, I have focused on forced migration and analyzing migration flows between sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America, especially, where I have found the voices and the faces of women that have been victims of social inequality. And this, of course, being able to be aware of that makes our frameworks, our human frameworks, much more sensitive. So it's about humanizing the scientific practice as a need to transform any social transformation process, which is precisely what we have been doing in the 3 years that I have been at the helm of the Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation. My training was with the Zapatista women in Chiapas, with feminist movements in Mexico, with the mothers who seek their children disappeared at the hands of drug trafficking and the drug trade. All of this has given rise to new epistemologies vis-a-vis the relationship of human and governance structures. And it's those very epistemologies that need to help us deconstruct the forms of governance in our context. We have been governed in the same manner for more than 200 years, following a republican system where knowledge hasn't been duly recognized. We're now working on setting up a governance system based on progressivism. So this, of course, brings about logical action frameworks that seek to have an impact on how policies are designed and to bring down those dominant structures. As regards Antarctica and research of hydrobiology, biological sciences, marine research, in that regard, there's an overlap with climate change knowledge and climate change research. What the ministry is doing is it's driving the first Antarctic national program, and we are to set up an Antarctic National Institute with the support of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that will certainly have a gender perspective in how we lead research vis-a-vis strategic projects. We have a joint agenda with Chile. We are preparing a mission led by women to Antarctica. I won't get ahead of details because we're still finishing up the details between both countries' ministries of foreign affairs, where we believe that this presence in the white continent will provide very important inputs on how climate change is altering the national biological conditions of ecosystems, all of it led by women. Of course, there are already ongoing research endeavors, but as part of recognition frameworks that we either don't know about or that have not been made visible. We also have called upon all structures on the need to incorporate a gender perspective to make knowledge more democratic. We are reaching out to different publishing houses, scientific journal publishing houses, for them to include the gender perspective. Generally, women are co-authors to research projects and the articles that are written for those projects. How can we go from being co-authors to being authors? By being recognized in our contribution in building this knowledge and its impact for the entire scientific community. These are elements that continue to be discussed at a public policy level, and it's still very important for our government that we continue to foster these discussions and these reflections, and we celebrate the fact that all of this is coming from a trans-border discussion. Last, I would like to say, every woman in science becomes a benchmark or something to aspire to, especially for younger girls and women. I know that as you as scientists, when you go to your hometowns, the little girls there are your followers on TikTok or whatever social network, and that's quite important. Being a woman in science brings about a degree of responsibility with the collective memory and the representational symbols, as well as the worldviews that are created in many of these children whose childhood is oftentimes forgotten. But they see women as something to look up to. A little girl in Tumaco, a far-removed town in Colombia, I remember told me once, "I've been observing you, I've been watching you." To have a little girl follow you on social media means that she sees you as a point of reference. Then this means that you have to be more ethical, more transparent, and certainly hardworking in making sure that you're not being left behind in decision-making for sciences, which is decision-making for politics. Thank you. Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you for taking this opportunity to be here and for supporting the interregional dialogue, because I think it's important to hear from the top. And as you also mentioned, we cannot differentiate science from politics. We have to always take into account that the two go together. Otherwise, we cannot keep on pushing the scientific agenda for women if we don't also influence policy. And to thank you, Dr. Baptiste, for first of all hosting us, but also for the wonderful work that you're also doing in terms of pushing the women agenda in science. And Carolina, of course, thank you so much, because it's been amazing. And I think it's really important that we recognize that also Carolina was at the backbone of our discussion last year. Once the minister had suggested that we are coming to Bogota, it was also important that we had the support and help from Carolina. So thank you so much for hosting us. And I want to finish. I think the message from the minister is critical. Wherever we do, wherever we are, we need to be able to show it, but also get to realize that we are an example to someone. The future that we've been talking about here today, the shared future, the wonderful future, we have to be an example to set up so that we can have the multiple number of people and women in science that then will make a difference. Thank you so much, and thank you for the audience, and for those who asked the question, thank you. Gracias, señor.
Sí, perfecto. Bien. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much.
De este extraordinario espacio,
After this wonderful panel,
agradecemos a la señora ministra,
thank you again to the Minister of Science, Technology, and Innovation, to the Rector of an university, to Carolina, and to Apillo for this wonderful session.
ahora quiero invitar
Now I'd like to ask Florencia Vergés de Oreal from the Buenos Aires office to join me here on stage. She will be moderating and, of course, introducing the next plenary session on perspectives from different regions, the British vantage point and the IDRC's vantage point. I would also like to ask Laura Barragán from Colombia's British Council to join us here on stage, as well as Carla Apolinario de Castro from the Federal Fluminense University in Brazil.
Carla Apolinario de Castro.
Carla Apolinario de Castro, are you here now? I know you were here a few minutes ago. While we give the minister a chance to abandon the auditorium, I would like to say that I am tasked with the difficult task of welcoming you to the last session of the first day in this interregional dialogue. Before we begin, and before I tell you what the next panel is about, I would like for us to look back and think of what we've done and heard and learned today. Certainly, many a thing to think about. it is not casual that we're wrapping up the session with this very plenary. We started out in the morning with a political dialogue, with a great deal of commitment, and we concluded that we were all in agreement that we needed to act. So after that political dialogue, in which we considered the roadmap, the guidelines, and the values, we moved on to panels in which university associations from the different regions gave us their specific experiences of what they have been working on in order to act towards education cooperation. So in the most recent panel, we had a very interesting discussion focusing on equity and equality policy to promote women's access to scientific research. And the Minister of Science Innovation told us about very specific actions that are being undertaken to promote women's participation. And now, from different perspectives, we're going to be welcoming other visions from other regions. We have the British Council and also Canada's IDRC. And through them, we're going to be able to learn about how different regions in the world showcase how we can collaborate, and based on pluralistic and shared values, we can arrive at concrete action. So what these panels are going to do is present two specific and concrete actions that showcase inter-regional cooperation as a tool for equity. They will also demonstrate how political commitment translated into concrete actions in the regions. First off, I would like to welcome our colleague from the British Council in Colombia, Laura Barragán Montaña. To my far left, she's a senior director at the British Council in Colombia, joined to my near left by a Brazilian colleague from the Federal Fluminense University. The British Council has been working with both Brazil and Colombia, and that's how they're going to be presenting a program that I won't refer to any further because I would like for our panelists to talk about the program. So first, Laura and then Carla Apolinario de Castro. The two of them will be presenting this experience. So I leave you, Carla and Laura. Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you today to show you this work that we have been doing at a regional level, promoted by the British Council. I'm happy that you can see my presentation. Surely, some of you have heard about the British Council, but just to be on the safe side, I'd like to tell you a bit about what we do. We're the UK's international organization in charge of all soft cooperation, i.e. education and culture, in order to promote peace and prosperity between the UK and the more than 110 countries in which we are present. This we do through communication channels and collaboration bridges. We've been present in the Americas for many, many years. We started in Brazil in 1945 and in Colombia in 1939, earlier than that. And all of the actions that we undertake, of course, are geared towards promoting equality, inclusion, and diversity. That's how, at a regional level, we have our Women in Sciences program, Women in Science, which seeks, of course, to strengthen capabilities and bonds and linkages. This may sound ambitious, but what we seek to do is to transform patterns of influence and produce leaderships that do represent gender equality in the STEM area: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. For this, we work along 3 basic lines of work. One of them is inspiration, recognition, and performance. I could take forever talking about each one of them, but I won't do that because whom we mostly want to listen from is our colleague, Laura. But I will tell you about some of the challenges that we tried to combat in each one of those pillars. As regards inspiration, we want to inspire little girls to want to pursue the sciences. There's a lack of inspiring models, and there also are a lot of either conscious or unconscious stereotypes and biases from teachers and even family members, and that may impact the quality of scientific teaching for girls, especially at the primary and middle school levels. We also have challenges vis-a-vis a shortage of mentors that can support young researchers, and also a lack of support as regards childcare. There's a lot of evidence that proves the impact of maternity on researchers, how this lowers their publications, and of course sexism and racism, all of which women have to deal with in education institutions. And last, of course, as regards recognition, a lack of financial support, but also an underrepresentation of women in top class research projects and groups. That's how at a regional level we have different programs that seek to work along each one of these lines. And just to give you one example and not to overwhelm you with too much data, as regards inspiration here in Colombia,
we have a program known as Coding for Kids, but now it's called Colombia Programa. This is an effort that reaches more than 1 million students in primary school, where we bring girls closer to computing design. We also have other programs, including scholarships such as Women in Science and Women in STEM, where we allocate funds so that women can complete their master's degrees in the UK. And in addition to this, we have this wonderful program that we would like to tell you about. These are images that we can show you so that you can look up more information online. The interpreters must be adoring me for showing all of this. But this, we just wanted to tell you that you can look it up online. We have podcasts like Women in Science, and we have magazines that can be looked up through our websites. We also have programs at British Council, Mexico, and Peru offering mentorship, where we identify women in universities with mentorship skills, and we train them with UK colleagues so that they accompany researchers arriving at higher level education institutions. And as for recognition, we have this program that we want to tell you about, which were the partnerships for gender equality between the UK and Brazil that sought to identify collaborations between UK universities and Brazilian universities so that they could develop specific projects that would lead to practices and policies that would foster gender equality. This work was undertaken with British universities that would have Athena Swan Charter certifications. Have you heard about Athena Swan Charter? Let me tell you what that is about. Well, this is also important because this inspired us to develop this program. This initiative led to this framework for equality for higher education institutions. What is this framework about? It is a tool to follow up on the implementation of gender equality policies in higher education universities. This structure helps leaders and members of the educational community and everybody that is part of the higher education ecosystem to organize and to understand the importance of gender equality and diversity initiatives so that they can discuss about them and to start planning towards that objective. This is the reason why we say that this framework is a catalyzer for institutional equality, because it helps universities to start debates and to identify actionable working plans. This is also an effort between universities, higher education institutions, and financing institutions. It sends out a sign to the market telling the ecosystem that this is an organization and this is an entity that cares about gender equality aspects. And this also fosters transparency and the collection of data and data analysis so that it makes sense for the university and the ecosystem. What are our principles? This is not a battalion of foreign people coming in to scavenge my university. No, this is an assessment project, and there is an assessment team responsible for doing this. This is done in a consultation and participatory manner. This is not just completed at the desk of one single person. However, it does collect data. And this sounds easier than what it truly is, because we are talking about uncomfortable data, for example, pertaining to sexual harassment reports, or also the salaries of male and female professors, or also how many articles are being published by male and female professors. These are the numbers that we're trying to gather so that we can shed light on gender equality matters, and we have a communication plan that allows us to develop this framework so that it involves the community and that this data can be presented with transparency. And if we do not have information, we work on a plan to collect the necessary data so that the institution can create self-reflection processes and prioritize matters to be solved. Because in Colombia, we say, if you cover too much, you don't achieve much. So it's not just about solving everything at once, but to set clear priorities so that we can create an effective and measurable action plan. I think I told you about Athena Swan Charter. It is called SWAN because of the Scientific Women's Academic Network. This has been present for 20 years in the United Kingdom already. It was launched in 2005 to recognize the work conducted by universities to promote gender equality in STEM areas. It seeks to institutionalize equality and diversity in higher education universities, and it is so prestigious that now they grant awards. So they could say, I have a gold medal, the silver or the bronze medal by Athena Swan. This creates an ecosystem that allows universities to show that they have transformed and invested in their policies so that they can promote gender equality. One of the greatest impacts of the Athena Swan initiative has proven that 93% of organizations that have joined these efforts indicate that by implementing this certification, they have seen a positive impact in the equality policies in their organizations. This initiative has already expanded, and it's been in Canada since 2019, in the US since 2018, and in the UK we already have 142 universities that are part of this initiative, in Ireland and in Australia as well. So this is not exactly the framework that we are working on now. However, it did serve as inspiration. And of course, there are many impact assessments related to Athena Swan, but this is just an example because we have limited time. But you can see the percentage of female leaders in research in one of the largest research centers in the UK. And you can see the dark pink bar, and we can see how the leaders have increased significantly, from almost 7% to 25%. So these are actions that do work. We are excited and we are inspired by this model. And we know that at the British Council, they never seek to copy-paste a foreign model without adapting it to the local context. This is the reason why we started with this initiative to a call for tender for gender equality projects in Brazil so that we can strengthen the capacities to contribute to the framework. We did assessed and evaluated the framework in different geographies in Brazil. We financed 15 projects. One of them, which is part of the university of my colleague Carla, we held 10 workshops covering more than 374 participants. It covered all regions across Brazil because we wanted to secure a diverse audience. And those who participated in the workshops also represented diversities within the different units in the university, because this will not work if we don't have the leadership of the rectors and the authorities of the institution. So they also participated in those workshops. And we had the beneficiaries, including students and researchers. And of course, the largest majority of the participants were women. This hasn't been easy, and there are many obstacles in implementing a framework like this one. I am sure that you already have 152 reasons in your heads to identify why this is hard. It could be bureaucracy, administration. Transforming the traditional structure of a university is a titanic job. There are others that are more political based, and there is no support to change a legislation of the nation, of a state, at the local level or at the university level. And of course, we always lack resources. But of course, these are also cultural issues. Structural sexism in higher education universities continues to prevail. And of course, we do see that this is not a true priority. So the intention of this program was to reach a balance with those incentives, both human and monetary and financial resources, so that the people responsible for this would have access to certain resources. And we also sent out signals to the financing groups for research groups and others. And we said, look, the Brazilian universities that are applying this framework have to be acknowledged for their work. So to conclude, we also conducted an external assessment of this program, Women in Science. The framework has been implemented in Brazil, but the entire program has been already implemented in Mexico, Peru, and Brazil. And the conclusions related to the program's design have been positive. Don't worry, I am not going to read out the slide, but they do highlight the multifaceted focus of the program. This means that we consider the professional trajectory of the researchers from the moment they start their careers until they reach leadership positions. And we have adopted the necessary contextual adaptations so that they make sense, and that the information received from the UK has been truly valuable, and that we have ensured diverse participation, and local partnerships have contributed to the strengthening of those initiatives. When it comes to implementation, this external assessment also highlighted a greater awareness for all participants involved. This means they are aware of the importance of gender equality. And also, there have been significant advances so that at the institutional level, they would place this as a priority. We also offered mentorship sessions so that we could consolidate the purposes of the framework. And some sessions were offered virtually, and that allowed greater access, and we were able to reach Brazilian universities that are further away. We also included women in the different universities, and of course we need to highlight the partnerships and the institutional commitment generated. This is just some of the data that we would like to share with you, but this assessment, for example, shows the number of people who answered the survey, and the majority of them had said that this has increased the trust and the confidence in women in advancing in science careers. And also, the implementation of the framework has fostered the promotion of practices for teaching and mentorship that would lead to greater opportunities for women in STEM areas. So this is the very short summary of the work that we have done in this program at the British Council. You can see the QR code if you want to have access to more information. Hopefully you can learn more about the Brazil Gender Equality Framework, and hopefully you can adapt it to your own context. And what is most important now, I have given you the theory, I have told you about the theory, and now we have to see how this has been implemented in the field. And for that, our colleague is going to tell us about her experience from the perspective of the university. Thank you. Hello, good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to be here. I apologize because I will be speaking in Portuguese and Spanish, and I know that it's going to be hard for the interpreters. We know this is the language of the future. I would like to begin my presentation. Can we go back to the previous slide, please? Perfect, thank you. I would like to thank my colleague and Obreal, not just for this opportunity to present the Fluminense Federal University's initiative, as well as our policies centered in women and resilience. But we are also thankful for the support that we have received from Blitz since 2021. They have motivated us and offered us mentorship. I would like to begin by introducing you to the Fluminense Federal University. Our campus is located in the municipality of Niterói in Rio de Janeiro, but the university is also present in 9 other municipalities, including an advanced campus in the state of Pará, which is where COP30 is going to be held. We have an immense community, as you can see. Given the total number of students, both undergraduate and postgraduate students, technicians, and lecturers. For you to have an idea of the size of our institution compared against the community that we serve, we are quantitatively larger than roughly 5,200 Brazilian municipalities in terms of population. And of course, the issues that affect societies at large and the labor market also affect us, as we heard in the previous presentation. So given this challenging situation, we started to develop actions targeting women in science. And we also designed strategies to address inequalities, gender violence, and moral and sexual harassment at the Fluminense Federal University. We have an administrative structure with a rector, a vice rector, and several directors. we are members of the Organization of Equity and Inclusion. And we're also part of the Commissions for Gender Equality and Transgender Populations, ASEPEC. The path to get there has been long, all the way to the establishment of a specific commission to address issues pertaining to women in science, as we can see in the timeline presented on the slide. In 2018, we started a working group known as Women in Science to start reflecting on these issues at the Fluminense Federal University. We had identified 3 priority actions: policies and support for maternity, dismantling gender stereotypes and implicit prejudices, and ways of fostering greater representation of women in leadership roles at the university. In 2021, we indicated that we would be part of the project to draft the framework. And the framework was an initiative that tackled the institutional administrative issues. So we started to work with higher education institutions, and we developed strategic actions arising from the framework.
With higher education, public higher education institutions, the working groups are temporary and they have a specific scope. That's how we put together the working group and set up a permanent commission on gender equality created in 2022 with several priorities, with policies to support maternity and reproductive rights, also the promotion of a 50-50 distribution between men and women in positions of power and decision-making, and the deconstruction of gender stereotypes. Also confronting gender violence, harassment, and institutional violence. We have an action plan that has very specific measures to follow. We have different areas of work focusing along 3 lines of work as put forth on this slide. And we've made progress in the following areas. As regards maternity programs and actions, there have been strides that have been made, but we still haven't reached the entire community. And we need more concrete and effective actions to tackle all problems and issues identified today at university. These are the areas in which we have made progress as regards the barriers encountered and the responses to those barriers or obstacles. We have identified a number of obstacles that need to be overcome. as well, one of the measures or indicators are impact indicators, which are currently under construction. These two are currently under construction, the ones on the screen. There are also certain practices that can be replicated across all universities and all municipalities. With this, I wrap up my presentation of the initiatives. I again want to thank Obreal and the British Council, and I'm here to help in setting forth an initiative of the like in any one of your countries. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, and don't hesitate to reach out if you're interested in learning more about this. Well, thank you so much to Laura for providing such an interesting context on how the British Council works. She said something that I loved. It's not about copy-pasting policies and cooperation initiatives around the world. It's about understanding the context and the needs in each region. It's something that I certainly walk away with, and I hope that you all do too. I'd like now to open up the opportunity for questions and answers. I think we have a question over there.
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you to the presenters. My question is, despite this growing awareness on issues of gender inequality, especially when it comes to women in STEM, there is still structural and cultural barriers for women. Now, my question is, what do you think from your research areas that need to be given priorities in terms of policies, and what changes can institutions do urgently to curb this gender inequality? Thank you.
Shall I answer in English or in Spanish? We do have interpretation, so as you wish. I'll answer in Spanish, and I want to thank you for your question. I could give you my opinion of what the priority areas should be or would be, but I think that the spirit is for each university to find what those are for themselves, because it may not be all the same ones depending on each context. We were saying this in the beginning, and I said it in the beginning of the presentation, there's a lack of support for childcare and maternity leave, and this highly impacts women's ability to progress in their area. We call it a leaking pipeline. A sort of, that's where they start to leak. So in the beginning, or leak out of the pipeline, if you will, many start their careers, but as they move forward, many don't make as much progress as their male counterparts. They don't wrap up or come to the end of their doctoral studies and their doctoral work. But when women are most fertile, for every year forward, they would backtrack 3 more years than their male counterparts. So there's evidence that would point to this being one of the priorities where women in science need support for childcare and for maternity leave. But I would suggest that you start out by looking at your own data, by asking yourselves how many women start an undergraduate program, how many start a given master's program. If you look at your faculty, your teachers, how many are women? If you look at male teachers and female teachers, if they have the same workload, Are they earning the same wages? We all come from public universities where surely there are more equitable rankings for wages, but this is not the case in private universities, and these are indeed uncomfortable questions. So I'm not avoiding your question at all. Rather, I'm suggesting that you look at the framework, and I'd like to ask the council here. They were asking if we could again present or project the QR code. The QR code. That's it. This is the type of question that allows you to understand the current situation in each one of your universities. Thank you for the question. I think that there's the issue of maternity and violence, indeed. Indeed, violence is a problem, at least in Brazilian universities, where you have cases of stalking, harassment, sexual harassment. As for maternity, we do have certain measures in place, like bonus payments. We try to make deadlines more flexible. Also, in-person attendance more flexible for women at certain stages in life. But I do think that we haven't made as many strides as regards reducing levels of violence. A special audit effort revealed that 60% of Brazilian universities do not have any measures to counteract gender-based violence in place. So we're at risk in that regard. When women enter the realm of STEM, this indeed has an impact along their careers, not just on their financials, but also in general their well-being. We have another question to my left, if you can please help us pass down the microphone. And also towards the middle of the auditorium, if you like, we can take both questions and then go back to our panelists. Thank you. Thank you so much. My name is Carla from Costa Rica. Thank you to both presenters for your presentations. I do have a question. In Costa Rica, I'm part of the engineering school, and 25% of teachers there are women, whereas the rest are men. This means we have yet a lot to overcome as regards gender equality. My question is, what is the possibility of say, having a collaboration with the British Council for Central American countries? Has this been looked into? Is there any possibility that we can work with you to start to tackle these issues in our region? Let's get the next question, please, and then we'll answer both questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Mampe Chaba from South Africa, working in the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation. We strongly believe in supporting women in science, and we have many programs that support that, to the point where we are trying to almost get a balance, but we are seeing a negative impact that our programs have, where men or boys feel left out, they feel emasculated, they feel like they are not seen. How do we ensure that we don't have a situation where men perpetuate gender-based violence because they feel less included? What kind of programs do you have in place that can support women in science but still make sure that men are not left out? Thanks.
Would you like to go first? I'll go first then. So I'll tackle the second question first, and thank you so much to both of you for your interest. I'll give you the politically correct answer and then the real answer. That was a joke, but as you heard, we are present in more than 100 countries. But of course, there are many more countries in the world. And sadly, even here in Latin America, we're not present all across. Nonetheless, we do work with countries even if we don't have an office in their country, and many of the content that we offer can be offered online. So it's not a no. We're not saying that we cannot work with Central American countries. We work with many countries where we don't have a direct presence in many different realms, like with Panama, with examinations and testing, also with other Central American countries. But I would invite you to follow us on social media, British Council Americas, where you're going to find a number of tender processes and resources open to countries where we don't have a physical presence, which in the end is what we want to attain. We want to build bridges with countries where we can build a rapport even if we don't have a direct British Council presence, as well as to foster a network between Latin American countries and beneficiaries of different programs, because there's a great deal of human capital in that regard. If you think of what a university in Mexico or in Brazil or in Costa Rica could help us attain. As for the second question, I don't know if you'd like to reply first, Carla, how to ensure that men and young boys don't feel excluded. It's a true question. We have sought to involve men. There are very few here in the room, but this certainly is a testament to the fact that it's not easy, and yet it is possible. Because we are not the problem as women. It is the men who impose these problems. So they can choose to be a part of the problem, or they can choose to be a part of the solution. It's a cultural issue also. And we ought to tackle it and understand it as such, even at the university and the institutional level. I didn't understand the second question. No, actually the first question was for Laura. Go ahead, Laura. If we do have time, I think you're posing a very difficult question, ma'am. And I do think that it carries with it a discussion around positive discrimination, which applies not only in terms of gender, but also ethnicity and race. When there's affirmative action that seeks to offset historical inequalities, those who feel excluded as a result will surely raise their voices. So as Carla mentioned, we need to ensure that men are part of the discussion from the very get-go. But yes, there will be backlash. There will be white scientists, men who have been used to accessing all of these opportunities who are going to say it's not fair, and it's going to happen, and it has been happening around the world. From a personal standpoint, I think that data are our best line of defense, and that's why the program shows that data. Look at the historical inequality. What was the percentage of women in science back in when? 25% is what you said for Costa Rica, just currently? If you feel excluded, look, you're 75% nonetheless, is what you can say to a man who points it out. But again, we need to ensure that we can include those who have been traditionally excluded, hoping not to exclude many or to have them feel excluded. But we need to take a position, and we can do this with data and evidence. Well, I know that time is of the essence. I see there are more questions. We're going to wrap up this first section of the last panel. We want to thank Laura and Carla for their inspiration. So please, you can leave the stage so that we can now invite our colleagues from Canada's IDRC. Matilda and everyone else, if you want to start to approach, I think you two have to set up the chairs in a certain fashion. So we can give it maybe 5 minutes. And in the meantime, housekeeping announcements, please. At 6:30, we're going to be having our cocktail party. Very interesting, very appealing. You're all welcome to come and to stay until the end. It will be worth your while. Very well. We will now go on to the second and last conversation of this panel. We want to welcome our colleagues from the International Development Research Center in Canada, the IDRC. IDRC is a partner of Obreal's for a very long time now that has proven to have concrete actions and vision in the regions. So we have gone from UK to Canada and then from Latin America to Europe, which is surely a demonstration of what an interregional dialogue is. Without further ado, and yielding to Matilda, I'd like to first give you some context. This morning we had the ambassador of Canada to Colombia, Miss Elizabeth Williams, and she referred to specific experiences and initiatives of the IDRC in the region. So I will yield to Matilda to tell you about something very, very interesting, and I'm sure that jointly with British Council, we will see how these are very concrete endeavors that demonstrate how actions can truly bring about social transformation. So thank you so much, Matilda. Thank you so much. I would like first to yield to my colleague.
Hello, good afternoon. You're in for a real treat in this final plenary session. My name is Ian Thompson, and I am one of the senior program specialists at IDRC. Today, we are launching our newest publication. You're here at a book launch today, but it's a special book launch. You not only have one author, you have four authors sitting before you on the stage today. At IDRC, some of you may know the International Development Research Center. We are part of Canada's foreign policy and international cooperation work. Our funding goes to researchers in Latin America, in Africa, and various regions around the world who are conducting research on the challenges facing their countries and their regions. For over 50 years, this has been IDRC's model. We fund research closest to the problem because that is where we are going to find solutions. And today you'll be hearing some exciting solutions. When we set our strategy for this decade, IDRC identified rising inequalities as one of the two greatest crises facing our world today. I'm an engineer by training myself. Having studied engineering and started my career in engineering, I know just how gendered the STEM fields are. And that was a focus for us at IDRC. For the past 5 years, we have had a concerted effort to support research on studying what are the barriers, the gender barriers in STEM fields in the Global South. It's a field that was relatively under-researched. There was a lot of studies and findings from the North, but not enough from researchers in the South. We built a network of researchers, and you'll be meeting some of them today. think of this session as almost like a podcast, where you get to hear great thinkers sharing their thoughts, their ideas for action. Matilda, my colleague, is our podcast host. She's a knowledge-sharing expert at IDRC and also edited this compilation from contributions from researchers and scholars from across Latin America and Africa. Before I turn it over to them, I just want to issue a challenge to all of you to listen carefully, because I think in what you're going to hear today, there is an action or a recommendation or a new idea that you can bring back to your context. From whichever place you've come from today, you're going to hear something new, something innovative you haven't heard before. So keep your ears open. Before we turn it over to the panel, I'm just going to invite Laura Gailly from the UNESCO Gender Equality and Science team to say a few words. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, or should I say, dear colleagues, good afternoon or almost good evening, and thank you, Ian and Matilda, for the introduction and the invitation. So it's really a real pleasure to be here today. This is the final panel of a very long, but I think we can say fascinating day, to discuss such an important topic. So I really hope that you are all still awake and that the coffee is still kicking in. So we have talked about it several times today, but why is it so important to talk about dismantling gender stereotypes in STEM, which is the name of this session? So I'll start with some encouraging news, because I think we do need it. Women's participation in higher education has increased worldwide, according to UNESCO data. But I'm afraid that I already have to switch to some less cheerful reality. So according to UNESCO data, women still remain less likely to pursue studies in STEM fields. Actually, only 35% of STEM graduates are women. And as we move along the research pipeline, the gap widens, as women represent less than 1/3 of professional researchers globally. And then when we continue and we look at academic leadership positions, the disparity becomes even more striking. So to give you a number, in 2023, only 1 in 4 of the world's top 200 universities, only 1 in 4, I repeat, was led by a woman, with particular concern in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia-Pacific. And another number, in 2020, women just hold 17% of seats in national science academies. And also what's interesting is that we see that over the last decades, progress has been slow and uneven. So this means that there is a clear sign that structural barriers still hold women back from entering, staying, and advancing in science, and especially, of course, in certain fields and certain regions. But all this, you already know. But why does this matter for science and for society itself? So something new and interesting we did last year at UNESCO is that we asked over 700 researchers from diverse regions and diverse disciplines, what would be different in your field if more women were involved in science, to actually directly hear from the community. And the answers were really inspiring. So they imagine research that addresses a wider range of needs. They imagine a world where innovation would be faster and more inclusive. They imagine a world where scientific culture would be guided by ethics, collaboration, and social impacts. Then they also imagine a world about a better, let's say, power of role models. So how seeing women in science also helps younger generations believe that they belong there too. So then the question that we have been asking ourselves today is, how do we make this vision a reality? Because I think, like here, all of us, we do agree that the burden shouldn't fall on women to adapt to a male-dominated system. It's a system itself that must evolve to create environments where everyone can thrive, contribute, and be recognized. And that's where the UNESCO call to action, Closing the Gender Gap in Science, that was launched last year in February 2024 for the International Day of Women and Girls in Science, comes in. So with this call to action, we try to provide practical guidance for governments, institutions, teachers, CEOs, professors, women's network, and other actors across three main pillars that I hope will be helpful for today's panel. So the first pillar, is about dismantling gender stereotypes and biases by increasing the visibility of role models, and by role models we mean women scientists, at the societal level. Then the second pillar is about opening educational pathways for girls in science through innovative and inspiring educational approaches that can actually spark boys and girls' curiosity in science. So this is at the educational level. Third pillar, creating inclusive workplace environments with policies and practices that promote DEI. So this is at the institutional level. And then in just 1 year, this call to action, we really saw, we were very happy about it, that it really gained global momentum. To give you one number, it brought together a community of more than 8,000 experts and stakeholders worldwide. And little parenthesis, but we also have a LinkedIn group called UNESCO Advancing Gender Equality in Science. If you're not yet part of it, I invite you to join it. And also the call to action has really given visibility to existing initiatives so through a compendium of best practices, has strengthened research collaborations, including with UNESCO chairs. It inspired new projects, from media training for women scientists to the campaign Every Voice in Science that we'll show you just after. And especially also it became a framework for other initiatives, such as this fantastic book, Dismantling Gender Barriers in STEM, that you will hear about very soon. And it also led to a new project supported by IDRC and implemented in collaboration between Owsd and UNESCO headquarters that it will be starting very soon, but I'll save that story for the closing remarks. So to conclude on a positive note before this panel, what we see from UNESCO data is that progress is possible. Existing data really show that gender parity in science is within reach for all countries, regardless of the size of their workforce or of the region. What we actually need most is the political and social will to make it happen. And that, we believe, really begins by sharing evidence, listening to one another, just as we are about to do with this wonderful IDRC book and this wonderful panel. And really to finish, because we don't have a lot of time, we just want to show you a video from this Every Voice in Science campaign that was inspired from the responses to the survey I just mentioned earlier, and thanks to the support of IDRC. And then I wish you a good video and an excellent panel, and see you later.
Imagine a symphony. Every voice, every note, building to something big. Imagine, as the music builds, you notice instruments missing. What if entire sections were silenced? When we limit what's possible, we limit how far we can go. Now imagine scientific progress. The hands that shape AI to listen and understand. The minds that unlock the secrets of conquering cancer. The hearts that protect our planet's delicate balance. The visionaries turning sunlight into usable energy. Today, only 1/3 of these voices belong to women. Imagine more perspectives, more innovation, more impact. Imagine a world where every question finds its answer, every idea its champion, where no voice is left unheard. Science has no limits, and neither should the people who drive it forward.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Ian. Thank you to all of you here today for bearing with us in this very last session of a very, very long but fruitful day. I'm so honored to be here today and so excited to share with you all the fruits of all of us here on this stage's labor over the past year. We've been working very hard to actually come to this point where we have a publication to share with all of you, bringing together a lot of the work that we've done, a lot of the evidence that we've gathered exactly on this topic and on this pressing subject that so many of us here today are so motivated to work on and to help dismantle. I don't want to take too much time because I know the clock is quite literally ticking in front of me. So I want to make sure we have lots of time to hear from the actual authors of the book. I do want to acknowledge that while we do have I'm very glad to say that we do have 4 of our authors here with us today. There are many other contributors to this book from across Africa and Latin America that aren't able to join us, but whose words are all found in the publication, and we hope that you all take the time to hear from them as well. So to start us off, I would just love to know from each of you, just to get a little bit of background on who you are, on what kind of project you were working on, and also what professional and personal experiences brought you to contribute to this book today. Paula, could we start with you?
Thank you so much for having us here. It's a real pleasure and it's like a miracle to see the book. Okay, my name is Paula Vasquez. I work in a university in Cali, Colombia, and I've been working with women and green industries for the last 20 years. So I have seen how women have a lot to give in this field and have a voice and have wonderful skills to help us fight climate change, water resources, problems that we have right now, and other environmental problems that all we know we are facing in developed and developing countries. What we did in the IDRC project was precisely working with women's participation in this green industries field. How could we do to really foster their participation, how to develop their skills, how to break or to remove these barriers, gender barriers at institutional level in education, in the education sector, to help women to really make a progress and have a voice and have much more representation in this field.
Thank you so much. Andrea?
Buenas tardes para todos.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Matilda, and I want to thank the IDRC as well. My name is Andrea Potes. I come from Palmira, Valle del Cauca, Colombia. I work with the National Learning Service, SENA, and we offer vocational training from operator levels, technicians, and technologist levels. For me, as an environmental engineer by trade, of course, this is a huge expectation for me to see the participation of women in these fields. They continue to be trained. However, they face complications to conclude their training processes, but also for them to reach leadership positions and successful positions so that they serve as role models for other women and that they have access to opportunities as well. I come from an institution that is present throughout the national territory. We are present in 1,102 municipalities. We cover rural areas in Colombia as well, or remote areas in Colombia. However, we still need to guarantee access, but also heighten the performance and the recognition of women in this field. This is the reason why we are truly grateful for the contributions to this project, because this is our purpose. We face huge challenges to conclude the cycle, and this is the reason why we're here, so that we don't just offer greater access, but that we can ensure that both women, men, young girls, and boys can choose whatever career they wish to study, and not to allow gender to determine their profession, but that it's rather based on their vocation. Thank you. Dominica?
So coming to this particular initiative, I would say I have over 20 years of experience in the area of gender equality So in 2019, I came across an IDRC call for proposals on breaking barriers. And I decided to focus on a specific initiative of the government of Zimbabwe to promote gender equality in university education. So I chose a case study of women's university in Africa, which to me is a unique initiative of the government of Zimbabwe. The university was established in 2002, but since then there was no evaluation of the successes of that particular initiative, and also the challenges that the university was facing in terms of addressing gender disparities in university education. So I decided to respond to the call for proposals from IDRC, specifically focusing on this particular case study. So, and using a unique methodology back then, the gender audit methodology, which was also very unique to the higher education sector. So the findings of this particular project supported by IDRC were actually very exciting, and I thought it's important to contribute to this particular volume that Matilda has made reference to. Contributing to this initiative, to me, was important from a number of perspectives. First of all, is presented the UNESCO call to action to close the gender gap in science is a practical call to action. And the findings from the IDRC-funded project were actually very practical, from the methodology itself and also from co-creation of the solutions that we're supposed then to implement within Women's University in Africa. So contributing to this particular publication was then informed by the need to share the practical solutions that the Women's University in Africa is implemented in response to pathway, to the pillar number 2 on opening educational pathways to addressing the gender gaps in science.
Thank you so much. And David?
Good afternoon, everyone of all genders. The only man in the panel is now called upon to speak. And as you can see, I'm not dressed properly. You all look so nice and smart. Just to let you know that my luggage didn't make it, and that's why I still have on my sneakers. Over the last 20 years or so, as part of my professional experience, I've had the opportunity of being a part of the consultation and the research effort on scholarship programs that help promote equality, social inclusion, and social change in higher education institutions. Conventional, I'm going to call them, higher education institutions in Mexico and Latin America. As regards my professional experience, which is pertinent to what I'm about to share, I had the chance to lead in Mexico a program. It was an international postgraduate program, scholarship program, led by the Ford Foundation in 21 countries, including countries in Latin America, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, all geared towards opening up master's degree opportunities to individuals coming from disadvantaged economic or social groups, to have them be included as part of the program. I too was a part of a committee that advised on an impact study with a 10-year span for this international program. The study wrapped up just last year. As part of this work and my research experience in general, I have focused on studying which actions, or on studying the actions that seek to expand or reinforce opportunities to access quality higher education, specifically for indigenous populations in Mexico, specifically speaking, but of course, always observing what's happening in the rest of the region of Latin America. Most recently, I was asked to be a part of a support study to understand the academic experiences of a group of 12 women who had been awarded scholarships as part of the postdoc work opportunity for indigenous women in the STEM realm. It was the first program of its type in Mexico with 3 components. So the target population were women, more specifically speaking, indigenous women with doctoral degrees. Second, the level of training, again, postdoc work. And third, focusing this program on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I'd like to very quickly tell you that in terms of statistics, the access of indigenous populations in Mexico to education, as is the case in the rest of Latin America, is extremely, extremely low. Somewhere between 1% to 4%. And if we talk about indigenous women alone, the most marginalized amongst the marginalized, this percentage is a lot lower. And if we think of those who have managed to get through their doctoral degree, their PhD, and are looking for a postdoc opportunity, the figures go to something like 0.0 some percent. So that's why this was an important endeavor undertaken by that program. In my chapter, or the chapter that I contributed to, and thank you, Matilda, for this invitation, and also Hannah from my DRC, who is not present right now. The chapter that I helped author tackles issues of development and of the main results of the program, focusing on future forecasts of what actions are necessary in order to promote inclusion of young indigenous women in STEM areas, so that the actions don't depend on specific programs that are important but that don't last long, but rather that they may be included as a result of institutional policies that allow for systematic inclusion of this underrepresented group. Thank you, David.
Key reflections that we've gotten from our publication, because although our publication is a collection of case studies, we do find a lot of cross-cutting themes and insights that we think are quite relevant to a variety of different stakeholders and audiences. So maybe just to start with maybe both of you, Paola and Andrea, I am interested in knowing, based on your experiences, what are some of the most persistent, both institutional or even policy level barriers that you've encountered in your research? And maybe how have you found that these can be actually addressed?
So much, Matilda. Okay, I think we found that policies, as policies themselves, tend to be so general, and it's difficult to find these recommendations to put them in practice. So the operationalization of policies, we find there like a gap. How can we just put this in practice? And also because the dissemination of policies sometimes is only directed to specific actors, but some other actors that are quite important are left behind, or their role is not clear. So what we have done during the project was to try to develop different strategies to try to put in practice what the policy wanted us to to move forward. And what the book also allowed us was to share these specific activities or actions to do so. So I guess that's one of the biggest barriers. And to give you an example, sometimes we find that these STEM policies, gender in equity in STEM, is most relevant for educational actors or policy actors, but what about entrepreneurs? Some of the activities we did was to bring apprentices from SENA to be involved transforming polluting industries into greener businesses. So they had the opportunity to participate during the environmental diagnosis, during the environmental action plan, and also during the implementation of green technologies and see the whole transformation of these enterprises. So the role of that entrepreneur opened their doors to apprentices and also different experts, women as role models, not belonging to governmental institutions, just working as consultants or maybe with another kind of institutions, not necessarily educational ones, was key for us. Bringing all these actors together, and some of them didn't even know they had a role in these STEM fields, in these gender and green STEM fields.
Thank you. Andrea, would you like to provide any specific insights from your work with SENA in particular?
Okay, bueno. Pues adicionalmente a lo que
Let's see. So, in addition to what Paola mentioned just a few moments ago, we were basically in a situation with our apprentices, both men and women, in the sense that they didn't have role models in the sciences, either men or women, much less Colombian, men or women. So in the end, with the program, once we identified all the barriers that they were facing in terms of access, in terms of development, in terms of being able to come to the end of their programs, their studies, and then to perform professionally, it became evident that we needed to provide soft and hard skills that would allow them to bring down those barriers. But those barriers, in many a case, were not for our apprentices or instructors to bring down. There are several actors that needed to be taken into account. Oftentimes, graduates won't be able to find a job in the productive sector. Oftentimes, surely they will find opportunities in what we're calling the popular economy, which are ever larger in our countries. And as I mentioned earlier, if we consider the fact that SENA has a countrywide presence in the regions, we don't only tend to specific needs of the larger industries, but also the smaller production units that have an environmental impact even without knowing it. And also that that women's role in these areas are going unrecognized. So as part of the project, we were able to, on the one hand, with soft skills, help build and co-create with the beneficiaries of the program on strategies like prototypes that would allow a small family that grows coffee in a far removed area to think of their production unit as a system and not just coffee milling, for example, but that they were doing other things as part of the coffee growing and coffee production effort that were contributing to the entire ecosystem. And we were able to, with those units, with university students, with apprentices, and with mentors, we were able to co-create and to build something together for that family to think of that production unit as a system so that they could start to grow in a more sustainable and green fashion. And not just with coffee growing, but with urban orchards, with women victims of violence in homes and shelter homes. Also, recognizing the importance of different education levels was very important as part of this project. At the technical and technological levels, our students could think of themselves as peers to professional program students, and to recognize a teacher or a faculty member as a scientist. Oftentimes, we don't think of the importance of applied research, and we also train through projects. And when we tackle an actual situation in an actual community, there too we're having research products. We'll tell you of a research effort where an apprentice in one workshop said, "I will be the next scientist," Colombian woman scientists. And we have to produce these publications because we need proximal role models, living role models in our very own regions, from our very own context, so that our apprentices at SENA, our young women and men, see that someone else could bring down a barrier that they may think that they can bring it down to, and that the institutions are there to help them and support them along the way. Thank you so much, Andrea. David, I would love to hear from you on the issue of these more persistent obstacles as regards women in STEM, be it institutional or political obstacles. David speaking. Let me share with you that in June last year, there was an initiative by the books coordinators, which allowed me to meet the co-authors who are joining me here on the panel, and several others that contributed to this volume. And since there was a contrast between the challenges that we had dealt with in Mexico to be able to roll out the program from a research perspective, and how this is a part of the operational team, and how I was able to support the grantees. At some point, I felt that the challenges that we had faced had been at least cross-cutting and certainly different. So, as with many other programs, like PEPME and many other innovative programs, there are many a barrier to face. And I'd like to refer to two specific barriers that I think are worth mentioning in this auditorium. I referred to this in my earlier intervention, and this has to do with the lack of reliable information about the group, the target group. Again, indigenous women scientists in the STEM area. Understanding who they were, how many of them we have in the country, what their areas of expertise are, also what type of research projects they are working on, how did they make it all the way to this postdoc level, having overcome so many barriers, and understanding what pathways may be available for indigenous women to continue to walk down. Many of these questions were basically pending when the program was rolled out. It was rolled out in 2018. I'm not saying that, but 2023 at its wrap-up, we had answers, but at least we certainly plant that seed to start to tackle and answer these questions. The second big challenge was the shortage in terms of practices for systematic inclusion of this group of young women scientists in STEM fields. Yes, there were some attempts, or there have been some attempts in the public research centers where they did their postdoc work. Some efforts to incorporate female researchers, but mostly just at the female level, not the indigenous women level, thinking of ethnicity as yet a differential component. Again, pathways are many, some in the midterm, some in the longer term, but I'd like to mention two, which I think are relevant. First, to finance studies that may support these programs during their rollout. And in this, I don't mean conventional studies that produce information that is, yes, valuable, but rather, Matilda and Hannah, the studies that you refer to in your introductory remarks that you have called transformative research. In other words, research that affords knowledge on the programs, application, profiles of applicants, etc., but that also look into what continues to deepen these gaps despite actions that have been undertaken for 20 years or more to include a larger group of indigenous women at the undergraduate level, not as intensely at the postgrad and doctoral level in our countries in Latin America, but that once they're able to get in, that they can help co-create research agendas. That's the first thing that we need to make progress on. The second thing has to do with joining efforts in disseminating the results of this type of program and of the programs mentioned in the book, as well as the research efforts that support these programs. In other words, research efforts that support these programs from the very onset so that when they come to an end, these programs, and this is the case of PEPMI, we may have systematized information and supporting analyses that allow us to, at the wrap-up of the program, to have relevant information, be it that we use it to continue fostering similar programs, or that on the basis of experience, we can inform policy decision-making efforts. And who needs to be a part of this? I think the entire team at large. This has to do with the financing entities, the ones that operate the programs, the higher education institutions where these studies take place, of course, and indeed the very women and the indigenous groups that are benefiting. They each have their own advocacy spaces and networks which can be brought together to ensure that these efforts and these dissemination endeavors have a greater resonance. Thank you.
I think at this point it's also important to frame our discussion a little bit on change and what we can actually do with some of the insights that we have in this publication. So I wanted to direct the next question to you, Dominica. I'm interested in knowing what you think a bold, actionable roadmap for change really looks like, especially considering the actors that we have today with us and that are kind of our captive audience for the afternoon. And also, who do you think needs to be at the table to make these changes happen?
Thank you, Matilda. I think what is critical is, first of all, evidence. And the evidence should be informed by the narratives of the women and girls that are involved. So from the study that we conducted, I always give an example of the women that were studying animal science at the Women's University in Africa, who came from a background where they were not exposed to dealing with large livestock. And they were exposed to large livestock at university level. So they were facing challenges dealing with large livestock as a result of their backgrounds. So it then informed the development of initiatives around dealing with infrastructure to support the effective participation of women in such disciplines. So for me, the most critical thing to start off with is generating evidence and amplifying the voices of women and girls in science programs. Then secondly, earlier people were talking about political will. But the political will should be informed by policy transformation. And of course, value-based leadership. We need a leadership that is committed to promoting gender equality and the participation of women in science. So policy transformation, which is not only ticking the boxes, but ensuring that the policies are implemented, they are monitored for their effectiveness, they are also evaluated, and learning is, or lessons are taken and implemented. So the issue around policy transformation, I think, is also very critical. Then, of course, ensuring that the learning and teaching infrastructure is also responsive to the needs and lived realities of women in science. So that calls for an injection of resources. So the aspect of funding is also quite critical when we want to seriously address issues of women's participation in science. Apart from that, staff capacity, I think, is also quite critical. We need to build the capacity of our staff, both teaching and non-teaching staff, to be able to respond to the needs, diverse needs of women and girls in science. So for me, it's quite a number of initiatives, but the last one that I would want to make mention of is dealing with a silo approach to the participation of women and girls in science. We need an ecosystems approach. Earlier, somebody mentioned about the leaking pipeline. So we need to identify where the leaking is taking place and address those. And that requires a multi-stakeholder as well as an ecosystems approach to addressing these issues. So in response to your last question, Matilda, on who should be brought to the table, the ecosystems and multi-stakeholder approach calls for everyone to be called to the table. It calls for collective responsibility to addressing this particular issue. It calls for the community, the parents, the guardians, the boys, the girls, the women and men at community level. And through our community engagement activities, we can also play a part as universities. Civil society organizations can also reach out to the same communities with gender awareness sessions. Our academic staff, our non-academic or teaching staff have also a role to play in educating the students and also ensuring that they promote gender-responsive pedagogy in their activities with students. The government, from a policy perspective, giving policy direction, but also the institutional leadership has got a responsibility to ensure that the institutional policies speak to national policy frameworks and also operationalize those at institutional level. We also have the student, the female student, the male student themselves. They also have a role to play, changing attitudes towards uptake of science programs. So for me, it's a collective responsibility, including industry. Yeah, because it's one thing for universities to provide a conducive environment for the female student to participate in science. And it's another thing after graduation, they go into an industry that does not provide the necessary infrastructure for them to flourish in that particular profession. So it's everybody's responsibility.
Thank you so much, Dominica, for laying out such a clear perspective as well. David, is there anything you'd like to add to what Dominica has responded to here? I'm curious for your perspective as well.
Well, yes, I was thinking about my answer to this question, and again, based on the experience of the postdoctorate program for indigenous women. However, I cannot think of a clear idea of this actionable roadmap. However, I do know that for this process to be truly significant and that it contributes to the transformation that we all expect and that we all yearn and that we have all been investing in, we need to have a long-term plan, and it has to be institutionalized in a way that it does not depend on successes, individual successes, regardless of how important they are. So if we are to reach that level, we need the participation, the joint participation of several actors. I already mentioned policymakers and decision makers. And of course, we need to involve academic communities and the institutions that finance these programs. All of them have to be part in the design of any plan that could lead to a change. And just briefly, I would like to tell you that in the case of PETME, when the IDRC, together with the National Council of Science and Technology of Mexico, which were the financing institutions, when they sat down in consultation with the science division to say that there is an area of opportunity to contribute to this agenda of underrepresentation of indigenous women in STEM areas, then that is an initial step. That is already a first sign. Houston, we have an issue. So we have a problem. We do require resources. They also come from institutions. So in this case, we need resources to take action. So again, international cooperation becomes pivotal for countries like Mexico and the rest of South America and Latin America. It is wonderful to see these actions promoted by the IDRC from Canada. And after joining forces with these research centers, then they become key stakeholders, because that is where they conduct the necessary research that are contributing to addressing important challenges affecting Mexican communities, but they can also strengthen their profiles and their trajectories. So then they can be seen as role models and change promoters. So I think that I would like to conclude for now because I don't want to take much of your time, but these would be the steps that we need to follow. Thank you very much.
Move us carefully into a closing, but I think it would be worth zooming in on higher education institutions in particular. And I'm wondering, both Andrea and Paula, how do you think higher education institutions can become more accountable and more proactive in fostering inclusive STEM environments like the ones that we're talking about?
Okay, I think we have a lot of things to do, and I will not finish today. But we discovered something during the project that was pretty interesting. I know it's in the literature, but for us was also key. We need to start thinking about education as education chain. We talk about value chain, food value chain, okay, we need to talk about education chain too. So we can see it as a system. We need, as educations at the universities or higher education with Tibet education to think about how to bring high school or schoolgirls more, closer to STEM fields in universities, how to develop activities together, but not only in the special dates, Women's Day, okay, all girls here to the university. No, that doesn't work. We need continuous activities, and also how to bring entrepreneurs closer to the university, and how to really break these stereotypes, maybe, I don't know, in a hidden way. There are ways we can do. We have extension courses. Okay, we can start, the entrepreneurs dive for these technical courses. Why not having these courses, but with female professors? So we can start breaking that beliefs that women are not the ones that they prefer, because we see that in the practical stage. Last semester in universities, they have to do these practical activities in enterprises to get graduated. And entrepreneurs tell us, oh, I do prefer men. Okay, but if they start seeing women professors doing extension courses, maybe that's a way we can start breaking those barriers too. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Andrea?
Gracias. Pues tenemos un reto
Well,
muy
we
grande
face a huge
con
challenge, of
relación a
course,
que, pues finalmente creo que debemos
because
acercar la
I
ciencia
believe that we need
hacia
to
lo
bring
común, los
science
diferentes
closer
niveles
to
de la
common
ciencia,
citizens.
que son
That
igual de
means the
importantes.
different
Muchas
levels of
veces
science, which
la
are
divulgación se
similarly
queda
important.
solamente
Many
en cierto
times,
grupo y no
this
llega a
dissemination
todas
only
las
takes
personas, y
place in certain groups and it doesn't reach
pienso
all
que es muy
populations.
importante
And I think that it's
divulgar
truly
tanto
important
para
to
tener
disseminate this so
como
that
para
we
poder
can have
reconocer los
benchmarks,
avances
but
que
also to
diferentes
acknowledge the
organizaciones y
advances conducted
entidades
by
están
different
desarrollando.
organizations and
Y eso nos
entities.
permite
And that
seguramente
will then
unir
allow
también
us
esos
to
esfuerzos
also join
y
those
ser
efforts
seguramente más,
and
tener más fortalezas.
be
Pero también
stronger.
creo que tenemos
But I also
nosotros como
believe
institución un
that
reto
as
grande
institutions, we face a
en
huge
cómo
challenge
ofrecemos también
in
los
the way
programas
we
de
offer our
formación, de
training
educación,
and
no
education
solamente para el
programs,
aspirante
not just
que va a
for
ingresar a ese
the
sistema
applicants who are
formarse,
going to
sino
join that
también
system
para
to obtain
el mundo
training,
laboral,
but
para el
also for the
sector
labor
productivo,
world,
que
for the
sepa
productive
también
sector.
qué habilidades,
They
qué
also need to
destrezas
be aware
van
of
a
the
desarrollar nuestros
skills and
egresados.
capabilities
Y
that our
finalmente
graduates are
también
going to be
podamos ir
developing.
venciendo
And at the
esta
end of the
barrera,
day, we
porque
can
algunos se
tackle this
imaginan
barrier,
por el
because
nombre
many times
del
people
programa de
just look at the
formación o de la
name
carrera,
of the
pues
training
de que son
program
unas
or the
actividades que
career,
solamente
and
va a
they
poder
imagine that
desarrollar
these
un
are
hombre. Por
activities
ejemplo,
that
en el
are
caso
going
de
to be
estos
undertaken only
programas
by
que han sido
men. For
masculinizados
example,
tradicionalmente.
programs
Entonces,
that
aquí
have
tenemos
been
el reto,
masculinized
no solamente, como
traditionally.
les decía,
So we
para
face the
capturar
challenge in
al aprendiz,
luring
al aspirante,
applicants
para que venga y se
and
matricule
students
en
so
este
that they
programa de
enroll in
formación,
these training
para que lo
programs
terminen,
so that they
sino
can
también
conclude
para
them
que
as well,
en la empresa,
but
para el
also
sector
for
productivo,
companies and the
reconozca a
productive
esta
sector
mujer
to also
profesional en
recognize
esa
these
área,
women who are
capaz de
professionals in those
aportarle a
areas
esa empresa
as
con las
being
habilidades que
sufficiently
desarrolló y
capable
esas
to
habilidades
contribute to
técnicas.
those
Creo
companies
que el
with
tema
the
de las
technical skills
alianzas
that they have
entre las
learned.
diferentes
And I think that we
instituciones,
need
donde
partnerships
nos
between the
podamos
different
reconocer como
institutions so that
diferentes, pero
we
con un
can
objetivo
acknowledge
común
each
que
other
podré
as
brindar a
different,
las
but
mujeres,
also
generar
as
aún
chasing a
espacio
single
para que ellas se puedan
objective so
desarrollar
that women
e
can
incluir al
grow
sector productivo.
and
Me
be
parece
included in the
fundamental para
productive
que
sector.
todos podamos
I
seguir
think that
creciendo.
this is important so that we can all grow
Muchas
together.
gracias.
Thank you very much.
Dominica, could I ask you just very
Dominica.
briefly to answer the question as well?
Thank you. For me, I think what is critical is to have equality and equity as part of an institutional culture, so that strides that are registered around women's participation in science do not vanish or end with the change in leadership in universities. So that's one strategy. Then secondly, as part of institutionalization, I think it's also critical that women in science becomes one of the key pillars in strategic plans, which allows for monitoring and also continuous evaluation. And of course, it should also become part of the key performance areas for university leaders. That way, I think it becomes something that is institutionalized and continues to be followed on. In addition, I also think that what's also important is what IDRC has done: document good practices, replicate them, upscale them.
So I think those are some of the initiatives that higher education institutions can actually follow. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope this gives you all a bit of a taste of what we have included in our publication, and we're very excited to say that actually our book, Dismantling Gender Barriers in STEM, Perspectives from the Global South, is actually open access, free for the public, free for download. So we do invite you all to look for the book online and download it yourselves, read the different chapters, speak with our authors here today, and contact those that aren't here today for more questions and follow-ups. There's a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of insights that I think are really interesting, really actionable, and give us a picture of what can be done. We also are excited to announce that we do have some physical copies of the book here with us today. So if any of you are interested in grabbing a free copy, please reach out to me, and I'm happy to give you one. You might also ask one of the authors to sign it for you if you're interested. But we're very, very excited, and thank you so much to Obreal as well for the opportunity to do our launch here. I'd love to turn just the final word to Laura from UNESCO just to kind of wrap things up for us. And I apologize, I know it's very little time.
Thank you, and I think one word, congratulations. So really, congratulations. And I hope you are all very excited to read it, because I am. So my closing remarks will be a bit longer than this one word, sorry. I know we're all very excited about this cocktail to continue discussing, but I also heard that the chief is very good. So in a few words, I think we can conclude from this panel that a lot remains to be done. But what's very exciting, I think, is that we see that there is a really strong willingness from many different actors to put policies, to put initiatives in place to dismantle these gender barriers in STEM. And what we have seen today, and with this panel, our speakers, and I'm sure like many of you in this room, that you already have great policies in place and very inspiring examples to share. And so building on this momentum, and thanks to the support of IDRC, Owsd and UNESCO headquarters are launching a new joint project titled Strengthening Institutional Capacity for Participation and Leadership of Women in Science with Evidence and Best Practice. Yes, that's quite a title, but the idea behind it is simple. We really want to make scientific institutions, perhaps I should rather say ecosystems, places where women can participate, lead, and thrive, especially in regions where they remain largely underrepresented. And so part of this project, it's a big project, but part of it will focus on really identifying and analyzing these best practices at the higher educational level, so from universities and research institutions, maybe some of your universities and research institutions. And if you still remember my opening speech, it's okay if you don't, this project will directly fall under the third pillar of the UNESCO call to action, Closing the Gender Gap in Science. And so through this project, we'll establish a global community of practice, and really we will look at 25 universities and research centers, 5 per region, that have successfully implemented gender equality policies, such as gender equality plans, and really look this time at what has really worked in these policies and why. And so then we'll support, based on that, more stakeholders to apply this evidence through policy leadership training for key actors, and as well we'll develop a peer matching program connecting some of these wonderful institutions already leading on gender equality with good policies with other institutions that are seeking to strengthen their own policies and frameworks. So the goal is really to use UNESCO and Owsd to really create this global space, as today with this dialogue, where institutions can actually learn from one another. So if you're interested and would like to get involved, I hope it's the case, please come and talk to Matilda, Ian, Tonya, and I, and the rest of the team this week. We're really happy to share more details with you. I'll stop very soon because we have a cocktail soon. And also we'll be organizing an information session about this project very soon to really tell you everything about it. Yeah, and I guess to end this day, I want to re-say that we truly believe that by working together, we can make gender equality in science a reality and not just a goal on paper. So thank you very much and bon appétit.
Muy bien, muchísimas gracias.
Very well, thank you so much. We have come to a much awaited moment. This cocktail is offered by Ray Guerrero. He's a chef from the Pacific region, the Pacific coast of Colombia. And he wants to share with all of you through your senses, food and drink, for you to feel this connection that we feel with Africa. He will be in the premises soon. The cocktail will be in the same area where we had lunch. So, just so you know, we will be going there. Is Ray already getting here? Let me know. And either way, please help me put on Ray's 3-minute video so that we know what awaits us downstairs.
Soy Rey Guerrero, hijo del Pacífico. En mi cocina no hay platos, hay historias. Cada receta que aprendí de mi madre y las mayoras del Pacífico es un acto de resistencia, un legado de memoria y dignidad afrocolombiana.
Todo el mundo está bailando, yo también lo sé bailar.
Sabores de Resistencia es mi historia y la de mi gente. Más de 90 fotografías, 53 recetas y un relato que une dolor, esperanza y orgullo. Aquí la cocina se convierte en memoria viva. El coco, la piangua, el biche no son solo ingredientes, son símbolos de libertad.
Todo el mundo está bailando, yo también lo sé bailar. Todo el mundo está bailando, yo también lo sé bailar. Como bailan los demás.
De niño conocí las dificultades, la escasez, la exclusión y el dolor de pertenecer.
Nací yo, y lo llaman viro viro.
Recuerdo aquella Navidad en la que llamé a mi madre y fingí haber comido. En Cartagena aprendí la lección más dura: el mundo no te regala nada. Y en el campo de concentración de Sachsenhausen, en Berlín, comprendí que la peor receta de la historia fue deshumanizar al ser humano. Hoy cocino en nombre de los que vinieron antes que yo. Cada plato es un grito de resistencia, una afirmación de vida. La cocina afrocolombiana no es un apéndice, es un pilar de nuestra cultura y merece reconocimiento global. Este libro es mi forma de decirle al mundo que la memoria del Pacífico vive en cada sabor. Sabores de Resistencia es más que un libro, es mi vida, la voz de mi gente y un legado para las futuras generaciones. Que el mundo escuche, que el mundo pruebe, que el mundo recuerde.
Muy bien, pues este chef es el que nos espera en el cóctel ahora en el mismo sitio donde recibimos el almuerzo. Los invitamos porque va a ser un momento muy especial que a través de la comida y de la música vamos a tener el sentido de herencia del África en Colombia. Los esperamos allí.